Queen of the Stoned Age. Melanie Wentzel has quickly made a name for herself on the international cannabis scene since publishing her first book, Cannabis Queens, earlier this year. We hear more about her journey, her work in the Australian medical cannabis sector, her mission to empower women in cannabis, and what she's planning next. Hello and welcome to the Lobsterpot podcast. I'm Dave Barton and getting a bit of sunshine today, but it's a rare thing here in the UK. It feels like at the moment of recording, which is end of February, but someone who I imagine lives in perpetual sunshine, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is the one and only Melanie Wentzel. How are you doing, Mel? Good to see you.
I'm very well, thank you. I thought you were going to say I am perpetual sunshine, and I was going to take that to the bank.
If that works, right? I was going to introduce you with a kind of Billy Ocean rendition of Caribbean Queen, but obviously Cannabis Queen. But, maybe we'll get into that's it. So, but no, great to see you. So, consultant, author, it's all happening for you right now, isn't it, Mel? Tell us more about what you're doing at the moment. You had the Australian Cannabis, I can't remember what the actual name of the show is, but tell us more.
I will. I would love to. So, look, it's all happening at the moment. So, full-time, I am making a meaningful impact in the cannabis industry as a health strategist with Canam, which is great because I get to get my hands on the Australian market, the UK market, and a little bit in the US market. And I'm kind of up to my elbows in research and in really ensuring beautiful patient care, patient outcomes, talking about all the good things, and really socializing cannabis outside of the industry. And I think for me, that's where right now, in terms of the most powerful advocacy is probably if the cannabis industry, stops patting ourselves on the back in the rooms that we know we all love cannabis, faces outwards and goes, hey, I'm going to take a risk and talk to a room full of cannabis naive people or people at the start of their journey. So I get to do a lot of that, which I really love. And also I'm in the very exciting phase of my book, Cannabis Queens, where all the hard work is done, all the writing is done. We are published live, we're pink, we're pretty. And now I just get to go to a bunch of parties, which is very cool.
Well, this is it. It's awesome. I mean, but it's become more of a movement as much as it has a book. It feels like, and certainly an international one. But last time I think we met in person, we were in Vegas, when you were doing the panel at Planet 13. There we go. And again, it's like wherever you go, there's you seem to be making impact. People know who you are. But how have you gotten here? How did the book come about? How did what's your journey through the cannabis industry to Cannabis Queen Supreme? Tell us more.
I would talk to you all day. This is beautiful. Very charming. So if I think about the kind of operational steps to get to having a book and getting to go to all the parties, I think it starts with my relationship with the plant. And I think that one of the important things to acknowledge is that over our lives, our relationship with the plant waxes and wanes. But I'm very happy to share. I'm sharing my 30th anniversary with the plant this year. I'm 45 years old, and I met her when I was 15, and we've been looking after each other ever since. So I think it's about the relationship with the plant, and then I'm quite a moderate consumer. I'm a medical patient, but I love the plant. I love what she does. I love the people who work with the plant. And so what that's really become and what that's blossomed into is me, doing the other thing I love most, which is bloody talking all the time. And to get the point. I mean, if you're good at it, you're good at it. If you love it, you love it. So I actually entered the cannabis industry almost 2.5 years ago. So I'm kind of a canna baby compared to some of these legends who have been here for decades. But as I say, I have a long-term relationship with the plant. And prior to coming into cannabis, I wasn't, a checkout chick or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I actually did my degree in psychological science and then spent 10 years in the healthcare system in Australia, working on system reform, healthcare transformation, and I mean working for the Department of Health, state governments, running big national programs to improve patient care in Australia.
Okay.
And innovative models of care, even things like social prescribing, which is almost old hat in the UK because you guys are so good at it, is still very new here. So a lot of my work has been socializing new healthcare concepts, right? So cannabis is the perfect fit. So I work in cannabis, and then in fact, exactly a year ago last week, I thought to myself, well, what is my joy piece here, and how can I actually move the needle or contribute to moving the needle for cannabis and how it's regarded. And I thought, well, you know what, I'm great with words, and no one's writing a book. And if I write a book, I can say cannabis, cannabis, cannabis all day long on the internet, and no one is going to, shadow ban me. So it was kind of a way to, be able to speak.
No, absolutely. And I think, again, it's great to hear. I mean, I think everyone who's in the industry, those who are kind of serious about it, I always feel like there's a need to have a bone of advocacy for what you're doing, even if you're not necessarily, working in the kind of healthcare sector or whatever, or charitable sector. It still feels like everyone I speak to has a kind of experience where the plant had, contributed positively to their lives or someone they care about's life. And again, I feel like for a lot of people, that's the sort of inspiration. And I think that's what kind of brings the industry closer than perhaps a lot of other sectors. There is that kind of shared bond, and, you see that all the time, and it's fascinating to see. But I mean, right now in Australia, I mean, how has cannabis sort of, what's the sort of state of legality? I know it's slightly different depending on the state where you are, but where are we at right now compared to, well, I guess other countries?
Yeah, great question. And we do feel a little bit like the odd cousin out here, so far from everyone. And we kind of are. I mean, we're only 225 years out of being a penal colony. So, I mean,
you're welcome, by the way. Yeah.
We're still the rough old convicts out here. And I think that Australian "how you going, she'll be right" attitude is reflected in our industry, because we are the little Aussie battlers, but I think we're doing a great job. So we're now 8 years medically legal in Australia. We have no adult use. However, in ACT, which is where our parliament sits, so it's kind of the Australian version of Washington DC.
Canberra, and
yeah, so cannabis is not legal there, but it is decriminalised, and you can have a couple of plants per person at home, up to, I think, 6 plants per household. Okay. Now, in Australia, but also in that same kind of territory, fireworks are legal, and also porn is super legal. And so really where our government sits is the most liberal kind of part of Australia, which is kind of cool. I mean, I feel called to move, but
all the good stuff's happening there, it sounds like. So
I mean, it sounds like my people. Right. So I love a firework. So the other kind of state-based difference is with our driving laws. So in Australia, it is largely an immediate loss of license and a drug charge if you're found with any THC in a roadside saliva test, any THC in your system, even if you are not impaired, because it's not a one-to-one relationship like with blood alcohol content, right?
Yeah, so it's your system for 6 months.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, we do with research, we say a 6-week washout period, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Being lipid soluble, your fat cells, they're just, sitting there waiting, like, let me hold this beautiful THC. So with driving, it's a little bit different. Effective today, actually, which is pretty exciting, in the state of Victoria, we've had a shift where judges now have, so you will still get a charge and you will still have your license suspended, but judges now have discretion in Victoria, and I believe in Tasmania as well, in terms of if you are a medical patient, it does provide some legal defence, and you may not lose your license. Now, these feel like small steps, but to us, they're humongous because it's progress. And it was very hard fought by some amazing advocates in Oz. So that's kind of the legal state. We're all medical. We're prescribed by a general practitioner, where I know in the UK it's a specialist piece. And also nurse practitioners can prescribe in Australia under the SASB pathway. General practitioners and other registered health professionals can prescribe under the authorised prescriber system, which is a bit more freer.
So again, what's the kind of criteria for qualifying? Because again, as you probably know here, we have to prove that you have a qualifying condition, which may fall under an umbrella of anything from neurological to psychological to pain related, through to, you have to have tried at least 2 different treatments for one of those conditions. And then, so again, the path is, it's not an easy one here, but how does it shake out in Australia?
Yeah, in some ways the same and in some ways different. So in the way that is different, we don't have a list of qualifying conditions. We have kind of a broad guideline for the types of conditions that cannabis might be useful, but there is no set list of qualifying conditions. We are most commonly in Australia prescribing for chronic, actually the most common condition is chronic non-cancer pain. And then you've got a whole bunch of other types of chronic pain, and anxiety is really high. It's prescribed for in a really high way in Australia. So anyone can go to their general practitioner, noting only 5% of Australian general practitioners still prescribe. So we've got a barrier there in terms of socialising that and making, prescribers comfortable.
I mean, again, that's very. But again, what are the patient numbers in Australia? What's roughly?
Yeah, so it's a little bit hard to track with, we measure the number of scripts in Australia, not the actual patients, because when our pathways we have two primary pathways, 4, but really 2 primary pathways. One is Special Access Scheme B, which is where a doctor or nurse practitioner sends an application to the TGA for a specific patient, for a specific condition, for a specific medicine. It takes about 48 hours, sometimes 36, and an approval will come back, and then a script will be issued. With those SAS-B approvals, we can measure this is how we know which conditions are being prescribed for what's being prescribed. Okay. Once a doctor, and only a doctor, not a nurse, becomes an authorised prescriber, they have to have done a few SAS-Bs. They have to kind of, there are some checks around their experience and their knowledge, XYZ. They become an authorised prescriber, and they can effectively prescribe at will, obviously using great clinical decision making. So it's less easy to track the number of scripts and the types of patients and conditions. But that said, a number, I would put a pin in 800,000 patients in Australia. Okay.
And so what's the population roughly?
26.6 million.
So that's a fair old sort of, well, I can't do the math, but that's a fair old.
It's a fair old lot. So let's round it up to 1 million, right? So it's like 1 in 26 people. Yeah. Okay. So if we think about it like that, if we think about the illicit market in Australia, we've got 7. So in a recent the household drug survey that was done recently, last year's numbers. Remember, there's 800,000 medical patients. 700,000 Australians reported illicitly using cannabis recently, right? So almost the same number. This is only who reports as well, right? We have to think about that with all the number. But 30% of those patients said they were using it for a medical reason. So it poses questions about our industry. Why aren't those who are accessing cannabis in illicit ways from the legacy market able to use the medical route? And I can talk to you more about why I think that is, but
yeah, really, again, sorry, because we face a similar situation in the UK, as you probably know, but again, the patient numbers comparative to the population are just dismal. I think it's about 50,000 patients, and we're 67 million or something like that. And reports, I think it was last year, they were saying something around 1.8 million people report that they're using it for medical purposes via the illicit market. So there's another 2 million just sort of hiding somewhere and sort of doing their things. But again, it comes back to, why aren't they using the medical pathway? And I think the pathway here is just too restrictive in many ways in terms of this qualifying condition stuff and specialist doctor and the cost. But why do you think it is in Australia? Why aren't they following suit?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it comes down to how our market is regulated. And I say this with all respect for the regulators, because I think we have to remember when we talk about the regulators, they are people who are doing a job, and there are humans at the center of it. And I think they're doing their best. I don't think
complicated. That's the thing. I think, they might necessarily make it complicated, but again, it is. So yeah, like you say, it's not through their own fault. It's through navigating what it means.
That's it. And there's not enough of a great dialogue between industry and regulators. And I think that the regulators, they come to the conferences and go, we're here to talk, ring us, XYZ. And each time I've rung the regulators, TGA or ODC, with a question, they do get back to you. But we just haven't built that relationship between regulators and industry. And the other issue is that with our regulators, and we kind of have three, okay, we have the Office of Drug Control who manage licensing. So effectively they manage product.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Therapeutic Goods Administration who manage patient access. And they're kind of, I'll come back to, I'll share my thoughts on that. And then we also have AHPRA, which is our essentially our medical boards who manage the prescribers. So the thing that the TGA are effectively supposed to do is manage patient access. So that comes down to our advertising guidelines. So oversimplify it, I would say the ODC are doing a decent job of getting cannabis medicines in and out of the country, registering medicines. Yes, we want more. They're an unapproved therapeutic good here, but that system is good enough. AHPRA are doing an okay job of regulating our prescribers, but there is no medical education around cannabis. So AHPRA need to work more effectively with the colleges and with, again, more dialogue. TGA have this really difficult job of managing the chasm in between. Okay, we have the medicine, we have the doctors, but the patients sit in the middle. And effectively, if I were to put it in 2 words, how the TGA are managing our medical market, I would say gag order. Because the rule is you cannot talk about cannabis medicines, you cannot promote, you cannot be seen to entice. And that is in line with pharmaceuticals. We can't advertise pharmaceuticals in Australia, but there's even a task force, a task force in Australia, which includes the federal police for managing patient access. So the TGA really have taken the approach where the first rule of Fight Club, you don't talk about Fight Club. But unfortunately, what that means is there's no great patient education. And what we're finding is it's through word of mouth, family and friends. It's through news media. And then it's through online searches, and they're kind of the main agents of information in Australia, which unpacks this whole other piece. What are the responsibilities of, for example, news media? And in Australia, like the UK, we love a tabloid story. Love a bad news story here, Dave.
Yes, no, again, it's there's nothing quite like the sort of red tops, as we call them here, sort of, finding ways to demonize the drug industry. Or again, this is a personal bugbear of mine, talking just how media representation of cannabis is, and whether it be on TV, someone's life sort of starts to fall apart and they start hitting the cannabis and things like that. And it's like, oh God, here we go. It's just demonizing that. I think I saw again, but it makes me, that aspect is so powerful. I mean, we had a scandal here in the UK to do with the post office, not to do with cannabis at all, but again, with a kind of computer system basically fiddling the figures, and loads of people who run post offices got incriminated, and, they hadn't done anything wrong with the computer system. That happened 25 years ago and no one gave a shit until they made a TV fictional drama about it. Then all of a sudden, these people are getting pardoned. It's kind of like, and that made me think, well, cannabis needs its post office moment here through the media for people to start seeing. It needs to start giving a shit about what it can do. But no, you're quite right. It's what can you do with the tools that we have, and what can we say and what can't we say, and how do we? Again, the industry loves a workaround, right? This is the thing. There's always
innovation. We're a hotbed of innovation, right?
Yeah.
If you can't talk about it, make a documentary, because you can promote a documentary, write a book, you can promote a book. You can't, you can say you can be a clinic that's providing cannabis services, but you can't say that, but you can call yourself, Magic Leaf Clinic.
Yes.
As long as you don't have any pictures of cannabis or say cannabis or plant medicine on your website, if people are savvy enough to work it out, it's kind of the job done. But it's so interesting to watch it evolving, and it's so interesting to watch companies evolve their messaging, to comply. I think people want to comply. I really do. I think people want to comply. I just think it's who is missing out are the patients. Those 700,000 still using the illicit market. And in fact, even if someone is self-medicating with cannabis and they don't know it, and this is my personal politics, right? Even if someone is simply using it for the euphoria and they don't realize it's actually quite good for them, even if someone, to be honest, just loves to hit a bong, I, in terms of harm minimization, would 100% rather than use a medical access route for quality medicines, for care, because maybe they become more open to the cannabis conversation. They might be using 4 grams of flower a day and spinning it with tobacco and combusting it, but under the care of a nurse or a coach or a doctor, may stop using spin, may go to a vaporizer, which reduces the volume of flower they use. It's all these ways we can articulate cannabis consumption with the medical system. And until we have an adult use system in Australia, we are going to have non-patients, pseudo-patients.
Yes.
That's a much bigger topic, but pseudo-patients in the system, right? And we have to accommodate them and facilitate them. And my last thing I'll say on that, because I acknowledge I have now climbed on the soapbox. It is what it is.
The soapbox. Yes, yeah.
You know, the other thing is that I think, you know, one of my special interests is women in cannabis, because I am a woman and that's my lived experience. So I think about my own experience. It is safer for everyone, but it is especially safer for a woman, especially a young woman, and especially a young, naive woman, to purchase her cannabis through a registered dispensary than it is behind the bowling alley or at her boyfriend's party or at, you know, behind her girlfriend's college, whatever it is. So the medical route provides safety, not only medicine safety, but social safety. And for me, I think it has to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think all of these arguments, I think I'll put forward here in the UK around the idea of harm reduction. I think it's in that idea of harm reduction, you know, with the actual plant itself, what harm is there to reduce ultimately? It's not so much about that. It's, again, I had a conversation with a few months ago, a Canadian sort of professor who is in charge of like public information over there. And the way he's presenting, you know, cannabis and harm reduction is to talk about benefit maximization and mindful consumption. And I thought that really resonated with me. It's like, you know, why am I doing this? What am I trying to achieve? What effect do I want to feel? And I feel like that is, again, it's the terminologies that I guess the political systems use to find ways to regulate things, isn't it? Yeah. But quite right. There's so many, the term harm reduction or minimization encompasses so much stuff, but not necessarily the plant itself, just things associated with it. And that's I think a conversation I think perhaps maybe they're not having in the hallways of power or whatever, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. And because we're trying to regulate something, you know, it's like taking a beautiful, massive, complex thing that has all of these beautiful roots flowing into culture and into medicine and into well-being and into lifestyle and into community and into family and into legacy. And it's kind of like trying to jam it into a box, stick a label on it, and then no one's allowed to talk about it. But if you can work out which clinics might prescribe, then you can get in, but only X, Y, Z, and if you can afford it. So ultimately, the age of prohibition obviously is not over. But I would like to suggest that we've had 5,000. We're so close to hitting that year mark of great cannabis excellence, knowledge, documented medical use. I mean, they were making vaginal suppositories in Egypt hundreds of years ago. We really have cocked it up in the past 120 years. That's the truth.
It's just that the 20th century has a lot to answer for when it comes to sort of prohibition, various, you know, dare I call them regimes, probably, let's call them that. But again, it takes a lot to undo something that, you know, comparatively happened in a relatively short period of time.
It does. It does. And it's a lot of it's because of the tools that were used, and propaganda is the most, you know, powerful thing in the world. And if we think about the prohibition era, we're coming straight out of the war. You know, we want you, Uncle Sam wants you. We were primed. We had been primed with propaganda. And then we go, okay, so we're going to make cannabis, you know, the devil's lettuce. And I love how we've reclaimed so many of these terms.
Absolutely.
Like it's my favorite. But, you know, how are we going to do it? Well, what's the most powerful thing that we can do is we're going to sexualize women, and we're going to make women are either the Madonna on the oven ad or they're the whore on the cannabis poster. And that binary of you're good or you're evil, and or you're, you know, you are heavenly and you are wife worthy, or you are, you know, you're in your torn negligee with your titties out. Like, I hope I can say titties.
Yeah, life's pretty cheap for that type sort of, you know, attitude, you know. And
That's it.
but again, that's it. It's the demonization of female cannabis consumers as much as anything else.
Absolutely.
And that's an important thing. I mean, and again, being a white man from the UK, sometimes these sort of conversations just don't cross our consciousness. And that's why it's important to have these conversations, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's good, you know, and these conversations are not intended, certainly not from me. Like, I acknowledge everything's a spectrum, and there are some people who will, you know, set fire to everything to be heard. For me, my approach is in fact to gently bring a conversation and just go, hey, look, this is here, let's talk about it. And I entirely acknowledge that my voice, one lens at one point in time with one particular experience. And so I encourage everyone, go out, write a blog, write an article, start a podcast. Let's talk, let's communicate, because the narratives through prohibition have been so condensed into this: bad man murders his family, and, you know, big slut smokes cannabis, and that's kind of the schema that people have developed. But in fact, you know, if you look at the far opposite end of the spectrum, look at the babies, look at Billy Caldwell, look at Alfie Dingley, look at these beautiful children, look at, you know, Paige Figge, look at Dan Haslam in Australia. I mean, these are the children and young people whose mothers have been the most impactful in the world in terms of policy, and they are a part of the cannabis consumer spectrum, like all of us. So, you know, we kind of get those narratives, and we get, you know, we get the devil narratives, but there's a lot of narratives in the middle and in between, and we need to highlight them. And that's what I love to do. That excites me, because I think it will shift stigma, that kind of societal stigma, but also I believe what my piece is to do is to help women release or grow through the shame that we've internalized because of stigma, and to go, you know what, I'm a high performing woman and I consume cannabis. I'm a mum and I consume cannabis. I've got 10 sausage dogs and I consume cannabis, you know, whatever it is. Show up.
No, that's it. No, I'm just trying to imagine the idea of having 10 sausage dogs. I've got one that's sort of half a sausage dog and he's a pain in the ass enough, but there we go. But no, 100%. It's that whole, you know, but there are different kind of, you know, obviously identities and dynamics within the industry. And it's one of the things I like about the cannabis industry. It gives people that opportunity to talk about their own experience in the context of the plant itself. And I don't think you get that anywhere in any, you know, we don't talk about, I don't know, energy efficient lighting and sort of say, you know, what that means for me to embrace that as a person. Do you know what I mean? I mean, because it's not relevant. Again, it's not tied in with it. It's not tied in with that stigma, that prohibition, that kind of negative attitude. And I think, again, trying to change the attitude is the creative challenge in many respects, or one of them. But again, this is what's happened with the book. So tell us a little bit more about the book and what's in it. And again, obviously it's about women in cannabis, but what's the kind of intent? Tell us a bit more about that, because I've seen it, but yeah,
you've seen the pink everywhere. She's all over the world. And do you know, I must say, as an aside, before I tell you more about it, I was so determined at the start when I thought of it. One of the first things I said was, and this book will never be pink. I will never make this book pink ever. And 3 months later, it was the pinkest pink in the world. You know, because I think, you know, the universe, you know, downloads, you know, what actually needs to happen. But the book itself is really exciting for me. So really it started with that idea of representation, you know, taking it away from that kind of whore narrative on the prohibition posters, bringing in that full spectrum all the way through to the babies, you know, and their mothers, and having a look at all of the different types of women in cannabis. So it was about representation, and my hope was to shift the needle in terms of just making women more visible, because I think not only in cannabis but throughout history, you know, what is the best way to control women is to make them quiet and to make them invisible. And so for me, I'm not much of a quiet nor an invisible person, as you may have noticed. So I thought, let's show some of these women. And when I started, I very quickly learned to let go of, in terms of my own process and what I learned about myself, I very quickly learned to detach myself from a desired outcome and actually become a vessel for the stories and just let them all pour in, and then to write and interact with the stories intuitively. And then I realized, probably 4 or 5 months in, I was like, oh, this book's going to take care of itself. Just be the vessel and use the pen, the keyboard. So I started with asking them, because so often we tell women what they think and what they feel. Even women do it to other women. So I asked. So I started a global survey. At the time, I had a good network in cannabis, but really no one knew who I was, compared to now, because the book has been so powerful. So my hope was that I would get 100 responses. I would have been over the moon. I actually got about 300, but 212 high quality, valid, in-depth responses. So I talk about 212 responses. It was 25 questions, mostly qualitative data. In hindsight, it's a lot of work to go through and code that data. So I'm probably, the next round, there'll be a lot more quantitative, I can assure you. So I did 4 months of research, and the first kind of 3 months were the survey, collecting the survey. I had responses from all around every continent. The Antarctica was the only place that I didn't get a response from. And then as a part of the survey, I said, would you be open to sharing more of your story with me and being interviewed? Most of the people, the women, and the audience for the survey, or the participants for the survey, was any woman or anyone who identifies as a woman, including any gender diverse person who spends time in the feminine end of the spectrum, who works in the cannabis industry, paid or unpaid, in any capacity. Because although the book was about the relationship between women and cannabis, women who work with or touch the industry know it better than anyone else, and I wanted to go straight to that brains trust. I ended up interviewing 75 women. It was almost 300 hours. I say 250 in the book, 250 plus hours. It was really more like 300 hours. I just didn't want to believe it as I was writing it.
It's a lot of time.
It's a lot of time, and I have a full-time job, right? So this is like early and battling time zones, and or I didn't see a weekend or an evening meal for months. But it was beautiful. Some of the interviews were 30 minutes, some were 3.5 hours. There was a lot of crying, there was a lot of laughing, there was a lot of connecting, and it was just the joy for me. And I realized about my journey during those interviews that there was healing occurring in me that I didn't realize I needed, because, I'm very spiritual, and the universe, I actually think the universe, said to me, your gift for writing this book and helping move the needle is actually, you're going to sit with women for 300 hours and talk about being a woman and cannabis. And you're going to bond over your shared experiences. So it was magical, exhausting, but magical. And then 3 months of writing. I wrote the first page in Chinatown in London, opposite my, red light brothel across the way. I took a photo of it. I thought the Smithsonian will want this one day. Fingers crossed. I started writing, and in fact, that's the week I met you. Was that same week I wrote the first page of Cannabis Queens. I wrote for 3 months, edited for 2.5, 3 months, and then got the book to print. So it was a very quick turnaround. So essentially it was kind of a 10-month project, and then a month of print management, and get the book in the pace to bake.
No, that's amazing. That's amazing. And again, like you say, it feels like that's such a commitment to do that, but it feels like that's the task itself is as much the reward as it is the kind of, the therapy, as much as it is the kind of the output. Do you know what I mean? And I think, again, that's why I do this. I love talking to people, love hearing different perspectives on cannabis and the industry at large, just kind of, from all over the world, because everyone's having such shared but varied experiences. That's what I just more broadly.
It. And those narratives are so really a lot of the time are very pigeonholed. How is this affecting me therapeutically, or how do I avoid, the coppers? But actually in the book, what I wanted to do, and what I really achieved, I was very proud of, is that I've really looked at women and cannabis and that relationship from all angles. So I kind of sat it in the center and looked at it from all angles. Intimacy, the intimacy of the relationship we have with ourselves, the rituals around it, coming together, girl seshing, the medical piece. I look at, the social piece, stigma and shame. And then I look quite closely with a lot of data at the experience of women in industry. I mean, and there were some horrific stats that came out of it and stories, but equally this incredible spirit of women in this industry that rises up and shines through. So look, I think the book will make you laugh. I think it will make you cry, and I think you'll leave it better informed.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it's like I say, what it seems to have sparked is a movement. So where is this moving? What's kind of next? Are you going to do a second version, or what's the plan moving forward?
Look, it's such a great question, and I have to credit all of the women who have been doing this work for so much longer than me. I mean, people who, organizations like Women Grow, who have been around forever, like, Empower Her, led by our beautiful shared friend Heidi Whitman, is doing that work. There are so many. We are Jane in Missouri. I'm a member there. They're beautiful. So there's so many women doing the work. I think I'm very lucky that my book is having a moment, because what it's done is it's drawn all of those women in together, and it's almost like Simba over I feel like a bit like I'm holding up Simba over the edge, like, we're all doing this, and here it is in hot pink for you to see. So I think that the movement is more about the moment that I'm privileged to be the custodian of, right? So I don't think I'm doing anything more or better or different than probably a million other women, but I think my book's just having its moment because of the support of all those women, which is really special. In terms of where it's going, look, it's so funny that you ask, because I came into this year. The book launched in the US on the 5th of December at MJ. Launched in Australia. It kind of went live in Australia on the 13th of January. And then it launches in New Zealand next week on International Women's Day. So it's not actually even officially launched yet. And even in Australia, I mean, it's really only been 6 weeks. And 4 weeks ago, I mean, I've been talking about it for a year. That's why everyone thinks it's been around forever. But, even 4 weeks ago, I started writing book 2, and I sat down with my, premium SurveyMonkey account, and I was like, right, less qualitative stuff this year, boom, boom. And I started. And Dave, I just realized that I'm one person with a full-time job. I've got an 18-year-old son who's just started journalism at university. I've got, so cool. I've got a very needy pug dog, and I haven't seen a weekend in about 12 months. And I probably need to take a moment and take a beat for 2 reasons. 1, so I don't collapse, or maybe 3 reasons so I don't collapse. 2, that's always good. 2, so that when I come to the next piece of research, I'm hungry for it, because I wasn't hungry. I was doing it because I thought I should. And we know that leads to dull literature, right? And the third piece is something I try and apply in my life, and I forgot when I started the second kind of work so quickly, is that, the beauty in life is the space between words and the space between moments. It's those quiet pieces where we get to actually absorb and reflect and hear and listen. If you think about it, if you're on a date with someone, that quiet moment before the first kiss, that's where the magic is. And I hadn't allowed a quiet moment for people hadn't even had a chance to read it. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. It feels like it's you need to feel sufficiently reflected on what the impact of this has been and what it means and what that inspires you to do next. So it's sort of almost basking in the moment and going, this is pretty cool. Yeah.
And I deserve that, because I've been in my pajamas I got a vitamin D deficiency because I didn't go outside. So I'm going to build my vitamin D back up. And but you know, I do always love to have something on the go, and so I had a realization a couple of weeks ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's really, and I love to write and I want to be creating something, but I probably need something a bit lighter this year. Mm-hmm. And I was entirely unqualified to write a book, and I did it, and I did a great job. So I thought, oh, what else am I entirely unqualified to do? Let's try something else. You know what I realized? There's no girl stoner movies.
No.
I mean, there's maybe one or two. There's a few characters. But what we need is like a girl stoner movie. Imagine women in the cannabis industry. They're going to conference. They're on a road trip. It's a bit like Bridesmaids. It's a bit like Pineapple Express, and this is the end. And you know what I thought? Oh, maybe I'm going to have a go at that. So I have started a notebook. And I don't know if you managed to meet Goob when we were in Vegas, but we connected with the most amazing guy who's kind of a friend of the cannabis industry. And he's a great screenwriter. And yeah, I asked him a couple of weeks ago, will you mentor me? And he said, no, because I'm rubbish, but you can text me and ask me anything. And I said, okay, that counts as a mentor.
Yeah, that's the same. Yeah, I'm just thinking that. Yeah, will you mentor me? No, but you can text me anytime and ask me questions. Great. Okay.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Afraid of commitment, but I'll take it. So will this make it past the notebook on my bedside table? Who bloody knows? I did study film out of school. So before I studied psychology, I did study film. So I may be slightly more qualified than I am to write a book. But who knows? But you heard it here first. Maybe or maybe not a Bridesmaid style girl stoner movie.
But again, it's the post office moment. Let's bring it into let's show people using the plant in a positive way, and not play into the stereotypes or subvert those stereotypes, because there's plenty of them. So
yes, there are.
That's it. But no, well, I await more news on that with bated breath. It sounds like an awesome thing to do, and wholly necessary, I should add as well.
So. Yeah, I think so. It's all representation, and I think it's a real opportunity to have some great laughs, and also show exactly how powerful the women in this industry are, So it's almost like, and I'll share briefly with you an early thought. Imagine a bridesmaid. I mean, you know my circle of friends, right? So imagine, all my circle of friends, okay, at say MJ, for example. And imagine, Will Ferrell as a very straight regulator who comes in and is investigating the women for something or other. And that, you can imagine like the hijinks, right? So look, who knows, but maybe that, and maybe I will go back into research. I do think there's a PhD in my future. I think this work is just the seed, but I'm curious is what I can say.
But I think that's it. We just keep asking we don't have all the answers, but the more questions we ask, the closer we get to them. That's how I feel about it. But that's fascinating. And thank you so much for joining me. It's been awesome to hear more about you and what you're doing, and very best of luck with it all. And I'm sure we'll run into you soon in person at another cannabis event. So thank you so much, Mel.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. See you soon. Take care.